The machines let out a roar every morning before dawn, right before the static of shift's end. At the string factory, São Paulo's swollen belly heaved with a million dreams left in the shadows. My place was by the window, a luxury my father often joked about as if it were a corner office rather than a battered, grease-caked bench. He poked his head in once on his way to collect his pension, eyes trailing the drift of silver dust and tapping the glass to get my attention. More out of reflex than care. That last morning, the foreman's voice echoed above the grind, sharp as the biting chill. "Eduardo, office. After clock out." The others looked at me, a few with pitiful shrugs. Andrea with her hands worry-worn. Raphael barely lifting his head. I nodded, wiped the sweat from my brow with the sleeve of my blue overalls, and finished winding my quota of cello strings. On that final walk through the corridor, I kept my back straight. The office was crammed. One side held a dusty trophy from some inter-factory football match, the other a swaying pile of unpaid invoices. The foreman didn't waste time. "Business is slow, Ed. You're young. You'll find something else. Sorry." The paper, a thin slip between his ink-stained fingers, slid across to me. I signed, even though my hands shook a little. That was all. I stepped out onto the damp street, just as dawn cracked open over the city. The breeze was damp, carrying 1,000 notes of frying oil and far-off diesel. In the thin quiet, disappointment chafed at me, bare and raw. When I got home, I didn't tell anyone. Mama was already hurling salt into a pot, her thin fingers fluttering over lentils and ham hock. The tin-roofed house pulsed with morning commotion. I sat at the kitchen table, watching the steam curl upward. I thought about my childhood. There was a time, just barely, when I watched my uncle build a guitar from packwood in the back alley, his pockets smelling of glue and ash. I remembered the tenderness in how he held the chisel, the sharp edge of his voice when someone called him useless. For a long time, I cherished a secret wish to make violins, to stain my own hands with the varnish and leave something behind with my name burned into the scroll. That day, after the humiliation of the factory slip, that old wish grew reckless again. I waited until night, when my father dozed with the TV's blue glow flickering across his worn face. I crept out with my notebook and a borrowed pencil stub, scrawling designs by lamplight in the shade of the stoop. I tried not to listen when my brother snorted and asked, "You still playing artist? Grown men don't make toys." My mother said nothing, only clucked her tongue and told me to save the candles. Weeks stretched. Unemployment was a lurking thing at every corner. The familiar nod or handshake became, "You hear of anything?" I scoured every job near the Beltway. Porters, drivers, anything that paid. But at night, I kept at the drawings, tracing curves again and again, obsessing over proportions I'd measured with scrap thread and beer bottles emptied by my cousin on his night shifts. The talk started after a few neighbors peeked through the window late one evening. "You see Ed? Thought he'd done with that nonsense years ago. His head's filled with music, but it won't put food out. What idiot dreams of making fiddles when the city needs electricians?" Every time, their laughter curled into my chest, a flame stoked by disbelief. My cousins, who worked in shipping, nudged each other over cold beers. "He'll get over himself. He has to." At Sunday lunch, I offered to show my first rough body, a bent cedar box with a harsh scroll. My brother, sipping thick stovetop coffee, barked a laugh. "What's this? For the rats?" Even Mama put her palm on my shoulder, squeezing gently, her voice low. "Dudu, not everyone is meant for fancy things. We are not Italians." But I kept working. I scouted junkyards for wood, pried slats from busted chairs. On off days, I took the bus down to Pinheiros, eyes pressed to glass as I watched violinists busking under the eaves of buildings gone black with soot. I begged lessons from old luthier Jonas, whose shop was cluttered with strings and dust. He looked over my sketches with tired eyes. "Why not be a musician, boy? Easier, more money than building them." "I don't want the stage, I want the craft." He smiled, thin and wary, but lent me an old book, pages stiffened with glue spills, the margins swimming with penciled notes. I read my street lamp, memorized the way plates should hum when tapped, how a scoop of wood at the F-hole made all the difference in the world. It was another language. The ridicule built as the seasons shifted. Once, after a flooding rain drove half the street to Grandma Lucia's for shelter, someone found my violin attempt hidden behind sacks of cassava. They passed it around, laughing about the crooked neck and the awkward bridge. My uncle waved it like a chicken bone and said, "Maybe Dudu can play us a requiem for his career." Everyone laughed, everyone except me. Shame doesn't just bruise, it lingers in the marrow, an ache that refuses rest. Yet every sharp word cut away the excess inside me. I learned to work with the grain, not against it, my own and the wood's. Years trickled by. I sold my phone, skimped on meat. My fingers grew thick with calluses. A lacquer of blood dried deep beneath my nails. I took patch jobs, washing cars, minding cousins, tutoring a neighbor's boy in geography, but every spare moment funneled into sawdust and varnish. When at last I bade a violin I could stand to show, I wrapped it in a length of old tablecloth and carried it to luthier Jonas. His hands trembled as he turned over my work, peering close, lips pressed thin. It was no masterpiece, but the curve of the arch and balance of the grain showed patience, if nothing else. "Where did you steal the plates?" he asked with the ghost of a smile. "Off a broken wardrobe," I replied. And in one of those rare quiet moments, he pressed the instrument to his chin and coaxed out a line of melody, not perfect, but enough for his eyes to moisten. "Keep at it," he whispered. "Others stopped long before you." From Jonas, I learned repairs, then started taking in work from student musicians. Bridges snapped in heat, ill-fitted pegs, old bows desperate for hair. It paid barely more than bus fare at first, but word circled quietly between musicians behind the Chapadau's battered doors. I became the boy who fixed what others couldn't. One afternoon, I ran into Raphael, the old factory mechanic, washing his hands at the public fountain. His eyes widened when he saw me lugging a case. He snorted. "Thought you'd come crawling back for a real job, Ed." "Not today," I said, tilting the box open to show my latest repair. The violin glimmered in the sunlight, a red-brown swirl, delicate as a chestnut. He whistled low. "Maybe you'll make more than I do someday." I outgrew the house after that, both in body and spirit. I rented a closet-sized space near the Yellow Line Metro. There, I set up a bench and a pegboard borrowed from Jonas. The smell of wood glue crept into my dreams. I learned how to say no to small jobs that cost more in time. I took in apprenticeship work from a workshop run by a Japanese family, sharpening my eye for flaws in wood that split unevenly. Sundays blurred one into another. My family learned to leave off the jokes as rent checks started appearing at the end of the table. It wasn't love, but tolerance, progress. My brother kept his distance. My cousins, too. It was easier for them to look away. Still, some nights I heard the neighbors' sneers through the window. Especially after a slow week when I walked in with tired eyes and empty hands, a twinge of guilt prickling between my ribs. Then came the email. Months later, a musician, Juliana Ives, winner of 2 competitions, invited me to bring an instrument to her rehearsal at Sala São Paulo, a venue I'd only ever seen from the street below, golden lit, unreachable. She'd heard of me from word of mouth, she wrote, and wanted to try a local maker. I worked on that violin for months, losing myself in the curve of the bouts, layering shellac until the light caught the grain and held it like threads of fire. My hands shook the morning I brought it to her, sweating through my only nice shirt. In the echo of that cavernous hall, she drew the bow across my violin, a pure, dark ribbon of sound that floated up through the glass roof and into my bones. She played a Bach partita, then the slow, yearning lines of Villa-Lobos. When she finished, she cradled the violin, kissed the ribs gently. "You've made something special," she said. "Will you make one for my next tour?" We stood shoulder to shoulder in the empty hall. She snapped